Again, thank you everyone for inviting me here today. I really think it's cool to come and be able to talk to this many people, and especially about topics that are kind of, oddly enough, near and dear to my heart, DevOps kind of topics. Like I said, so I'm Robert Kuhr. I am a cloud architect at Man Truck and Bus. I'm originally from the US in Michigan. I live in Munich right now, and so I'm coming here to grow, or we have a team now in Lisbon as well too for CICD. So quick plug on MAN. So in November 2017, they decided to open up a digital hub inside of Lisbon because the tech community here is just booming. There's lots and lots of smart minds and everything, and developers, and it's growing and growing. And so I think it was a very good opportunity for Man to get a lot of new and innovative minds to come up with new products that can come out at a fast rate, and also kind of pull back a little bit from the enterprise and get away, so you can kind of have more of that startup feel and outside of the enterprise. And so we are hiring more people for cloud platforms. We're hiring another position for our CI/CD platform. Most of our team is here tonight too, which is very nice. And then, we're hiring all kinds of other development positions too. So there's quite a few, or there's enough people here from MAN that they would actually be willing to talk, or would like to talk to you if you have interest in coming to work for our team. So I'll do this really quick. The agenda, I want to talk about how we get things out the door. What tools do we want, or how do we want to use our tools? What are our team's goals? How do we like our dog food? Because I'm a big fan of dog food, but we'll get to that a little bit later. Examples of how we're doing our CI/CD functionality. Ideas of how we're want to grow our platform in the future. And then hopefully we have some time at the end to discuss, ask questions and everything else. So the first thing, how do I get this project out the door? We've always done stuff where you can, or for a long time, you could always just have scripts that you deploy from your computer, push out, but that's 20 years ago. The goal now is to have real build tools. The first question, which is a lame one, which is what version control system you're using. Nowadays, people are using GitHub, Bitbucket, Stash. If you're doing stuff in AWS, the AWS cloud, you could possibly be using AWS code commit as well too. And maybe if you're doing COBOL or other stuff too, maybe you're using CVS still, I don't know, or Subversion. Again, build and test tools, they've come a far away from what they were like 10 or 15 years ago too, but kind of Jenkins is the de facto standard, but also deployment tools like GoCD from ThoughtWorks are in use, Travis CI, Circle CI. If you're doing AWS deployments, you might be using AWS code pipelines. And then also too, there's Azure DevOps up tools and everything else, but Man had this problem where we kind of have a bunch of different tools throughout the entire company. We have stuff for, we have multiple different Git repositories here and there. People are using Jenkins, people are using GoCD, people are using Circle CI. And there's no kind of total consensus of what everyone should be using. So one of the goals was we wanted to have a centralized core functionality that we could basically apply to all across our whole entire infrastructure. We also wanted to make sure that it's actually customizable for people who want really something complicated, but we also make it so it's also very simple for people to onboard. They can use typical shared templates and immediately start get up and deploying and developing and everything else and testing right away. Again, that kind of falls into customizable and expandable. But one of the most important things for us too is because we're not targeting only web users, we're targeting embedded development as well too. So we have a lot of embedded engineering development, and they have much different kinds of ways to use how they're doing they're targeting their build systems and testing and everything else. So we really kind of want to make a focus of it being output agnostic. It needs to say it goes to this cloud, it goes to this cloud, it goes to this hardware, it goes to wherever, it goes to your Raspberry Pi in your room. You should be able to hit anything that you want to at that point. And so we decided to use GitLab. It is centralized, and for us it's centralized in the fact that we're using the self-hosted one. And we are using one of the paid versions. We're not using the open community edition. We're using the starter one, so it's like the first level of paid. It has a built-in CI/CD pipeline for us, which is what we really want. And we don't have to have any extra software tools. We don't have to have GitHub and Jenkins or GitHub and Travis or GitHub and whatever else. We have GitLab Runners that allow us to basically write the kind of way, like we can have the flexibility to deploy to all different kinds of targets that we want to. So we don't necessarily have to have like a runner. For example, if you're using like AWS code pipelines, then basically most of your targets are going to be in Amazon. Or if you're using other tools from Google or using tools from whatever else, they might be more targeted towards their infrastructure. But in this case, with the GitLab Runners, you can kind of customize how you want to run it and how, or where you want your targets to be. And then again, pipelines are as defined as simple or as complicated as you need. So again, your tests can be, you're going to have like a simple testing pipeline with a very simple deploy, or you could have a huge chain because you have lots of conditional things that you need to do and lots of different steps for your deployment. It's up to you to do. One sad note for us is I'm a big fan of using SaaS services whenever possible, just because, I don't know, I don't want to administer systems if I don't have to. But due to regulations where the data was at the time we signed the contract, we had to do our own hosted one due to GDPR. That's how it goes. But we're in the process now of rolling this out to the whole company. So we're not all across the whole board yet, but this is something that we're going and growing throughout the company and adapting like more and more development departments as we go through. We also have 2 other tools that we're using as well too on our CICD platform. It's up for the teams if they want to use this or not. But we also have SonarQube. We have a community edition that people have that we're maintaining right now, that if people want to use SonarQube, do their static source code analysis or everything else on there, we have that there. It's possible that we could actually maybe start moving away from needing that if we move up to a higher level licensing for GitLab, because you get a lot of these kind of static source code analysis, DAST, SAST, dependency managing and everything else. You can get that out of GitLab as well too. And then we're using JFrog Artifactory. Right now, GitLab has the ability to do Maven and NPM, and it does have Docker images as well too, but things like Debian packages, NuGet packages, and extremely large VM images. We have some of our embedded development teams are building VM images for testing that are like upwards of 10 gigabytes, and so that's not something we want to really be having in our repositories inside of GitLab. Or in the Docker repositories, not in the repositories. So the next question is how do we use our tools? Hopefully not like this. It's really important for us to kind of come up with a way we want to use it and kind of get this out to the users themselves so they know how to use the tools properly. And not just that, we want them to be able to learn, like my goal would be also too is that they learn more than I do how to use a tool. Like I don't only know so much about embedded software development, which is like this much. But like I know a lot about web, but the thing is we want to grow with these people and show them how to use the tools, and then they can show us in turn how they're doing it. But to kind of get to the basics, the big basics of GitLab, of course, it's a Git repository, but that's the kind of boring part. The interesting part is the GitLab pipelines and the jobs. So I'm sure everyone who's used Jenkins or Travis CI or any of these other kind of build tools, it should be very similar and very common. It's a YAML file that basically just lists multiple different jobs and steps. So GitLab pipelines are basically just a whole list of different jobs that are run in a particular stage order. Here they have a really cool graphic of what a building pipeline, not a failing one. They always work right? No one has any failing pipelines or failing jobs, I assume. Everyone here is totally pro. And then the jobs themselves can be very simple like this too. But the important thing to note about all the jobs is that they all have an image they run in. So the jobs themselves are all basically containerized little jobs that are running. So you choose what you want for your containerized job, and then you have scripts, and then you say what stage you're running in. And so the default, I think the default order is normally build, test, and deploy. And so this is just like a test job that's running in a Python container. And so this is what I said before, like about how GitLab runners are basically just daemons that pull for jobs. So you have a runner in, it could be on an EC2 instance. You have a runner running on somebody's machine or on another, like a Raspberry Pi or some other kind of hardware target that they have. And all it does is just pull for jobs that it looks for, or it pulls for jobs that it can run. And it basically, you can have a notion of runners can be shared so that they'll take any single job that's available to them. You can also have it so that the runners themselves will be targeted to groups or projects or subgroups and all the projects underneath of it. But also you can choose to have a runner pull jobs that are only tagged for itself to run. And then to register it, all you need to know is the GitLab URL, a token. Of course, I'm hiding the part that if you have proxies and firewalls and everything else, then it could be kind of a pain, but that's with anything, I think, in general. But that's just normal networking fun. And then, so we have, like I said, we have auto-scaling groups in Amazon running on EC2 instances, having runners on them. We have people on our internal, we have an internal on-premise network as well too, or data center. And so in this case, because they're deploying to Tomcat clusters and they're very locked down and it's a third party who's running it, we still have a couple different simple runners there that deploy to these different Tomcat clusters. And I think it's running on just a VMware instance somewhere there. Again, local machines for embedded developers, and we're doing more and more as we go through. We're expanding kind of how we're doing it, but we're expanding it because what the development teams need. Also too, again, like a lot of the other kind of tools, you have different environment variables you can set through. GitLab passes a whole bunch of CI underscore variables that are, like this case, a job token, a project path, a registry, but also too, for the projects, you can define environment variables for projects, groups, everything else. This makes plumbing nicer because you have all this kind of built into it. And this is what I was saying before. So you could have you could use just a regular Python container if you want to run your jobs, or a Java, or whatever else. It's up to you. But this is all it takes to basically create custom Docker containers to run in GitLab. So if you've done a Docker container before for anything, then you can do GitLab job containers. It's very easy. This is just a simple one where I want to have a Docker stable container so I can run a Docker and Docker inside of Amazon and then have access to the Amazon CLI tools. And in this one here, it's a little bit similar to, this is more towards our serverless deployments, but we're also copying up some scripts that are wrappers. They're just little bash files that allow us, or bash shell commands that allow us to wrap really long things and write very short lines instead in our jobs. So it just makes it so that we're able to keep our templates looking a lot more readable than having very long lines of code or long CLI commands. And so this is just a simple example of what a pipeline would look like. So again, we're declaring what the default image is. We have our own custom one that we're using in this case that provides us with some faculties that we want to use here and there. This is the test section of it is very small and short. It doesn't take a whole lot to do. Again, just Python. I'm just doing doc tests here, just to keep it so that the example was nice and small. And then here we're doing, if you're familiar with Amazon serverless, using SAM using Amazon serverless application models to package and deploy an application, a serverless application to the cloud. So it's pretty simple. It's pretty easy to look at and read. You can, again, make it as complex as you want to or need to. This kind of leads to what the next evolution might be, because now we want to make it more DevOpsy, right? Like, yeah, we can build, we can deploy, but now we want to start verifying, right? So you have Notion now, you can start kind of creating your own special stages that you want to have. You have test, deploy, now verify. And so you have this here, now you have a new job step that's about verification. And so in this one, it's a very low level, not so interesting example to test stuff, but I want to make sure that it invokes the Lambda and it puts the output file. And now I share that output so that I can have another job afterwards that would go through and validate what is the output. Like, this is just to basically get the output, and I can have another step afterwards that would verify that it's okay, or I could do that in here. But again, this is where you have the possibility to kind of set this however you want. And so that was a little bit about the tool itself, but one of the big things too is what is it that our team is really trying to do? While we are called the CICD platform team, we are not only a platform team. Our goal is also to basically be enablers for, in our case, Amazon Cloud, because that's our main target for our cloud deployment teams, but to also get people to understand more how to break up their tasks, how to break up their applications so they can fit in a more DevOpsy world. And basically we're going around at this point to different development teams and doing more of a hands-on consultancy where we go in, show them how to kind of cut up their projects, how to give examples that we have, and then in turn, we're taking these teams that we're talking with, either the hardware teams or the web teams, and kind of taking the results that we have with them and building a repository of different shared templates and everything else that the other teams can come on, and so their onboarding is much easier. And so for us, and then for all the people on our team, the platform management will actually become a very small part of what we do. It should be pretty academic. It should be make sure the server's not dead, make sure people are able to create their runners and how they're able to do the administration for the application, for the platform itself. So again, really quickly about what we're doing as far as onboarding. We have basic templates set up for our team, for our web teams. If we look at like the Amazon, the AWS cloud teams that we have worked with, we typically have a development, integration, and a production environment. And we have AWS CloudFormation stacks to deploy that have auto-scaling groups for the runners that they are using on their system. So most people are going to be using the runners only for the deployment, because we have a whole slew of shared runners that people could do build jobs, test jobs, and everything else. But when they're deploying to Amazon, we don't want to store all the different credentials in Amazon. We want to have the runners live in Amazon in the proper accounts, and basically from a security perspective, only let them do what they're allowed to do in the account that they're allowed to do it in. And then we also have on-premise environment too. They have a development and a production environment for their on-premise. They have one runner for each of them. I think they have maybe it's a couple of different runners, but it's basically just two different kind of pools of runners that will actually deploy. The teams themselves don't have much flexibility, because all the teams they're developing for the on-premise are typically doing Spring Boot, and they're deploying all their applications to Tomcat clusters. So this is the place where you have little variance to what you do, and this is the place where you can maybe have too much variance to what you want to do, but it's we kind of have a mix of what you can kind of do across the different teams. And then we also have the onboarding, again, of the embedded engineering teams. It's really interesting to work with them. They are, at least for me, it's a different beast to work with, because they are used to doing a lot more stuff in the office on hardware, and doing things with different kinds of like service buses. And like now, it's not like web, it's actually going in, here's the service bus, here's the pins that you can work with, and all that stuff. So our team is taking a lot of input from the hardware team. So, but they do try to do a lot of their virtualization for hardware with EC2 instances. They're doing a lot of stuff where they have GitLab jobs that are using Ansible to build and configure different EC2 instances. They're now looking at having to move to using like the EC2 Metal instances, because they need to be able to do nested virtualization, and I think the regular EC2 instances don't support it. So I guess Metal ones are regular too, because you can set them up. But the big thing is we're still evolving for best practices. We're kind of doing a lot of experimentation with them at this time, and going through and learning how to do best to do stuff. And yeah, it's been pretty cool. So I said I like dog food. Well, I don't really like dog food, but I thought dog food pictures are cool. But what I really like is I like the dog fooding of your product itself. To me, it's extremely important that if you want to say this product is great or good or whatever else, then maybe you should try it. Maybe you should try your own dog food. So in the beginning, the CICD team was really not tasting the food so much. We were just giving it out, showing people how to use it. We were storing some templates here and there. We had a few simple pipeline tasks that would run some kind of basically just over-glorified cron jobs that was used for synchronization. They worked, but we weren't really doing anything that what a CICD platform should really excel at. And we were creating a few custom containers. We were creating some containers that people could build their applications to deploy to, either be a Java container, Python, Node, et cetera, C++ as well too. But we weren't really using the tool, and that was kind of a shame. And so for us, we really didn't necessarily understand everything they were doing. But like I said before, we had a cron job that was synchronizing stuff before, and it was synchronizing users between users groups and projects. And in the beginning, there was only maybe 20 users and 50 projects or something like that. And so the script would take 1 hour, 2 hours. Well, fast forward about like 7 months, and now the script takes 12 hours to run. So that's just insane. Like to have some kind of synchronization script that would actually, be used for administration that takes so long. So we really kind of thought a lot about, how would we go approach this? How would we make sure that between our SonarQube instances, our Artifactory instances, and our GitLab instances, that we would have the users synchronized across all of them. So we thought, hey, GitLab has system hooks. It's a neat feature. You can basically have a server on the other end and it would answer and do things for you. And we thought, hey, well, maybe we use our tool to update our tool. We use our tool to actually, help us create a solution that we need to build for this synchronization. And so we decided to eat a bowl. We decided we wanted to eat a bowl of our own dog food in this case. So we created, this is kind of a little diagram of what we're doing, where we're having the GitLab event sending to an API endpoint. We're using Dynamo table streams to feed information to send down to JFrog or to SonarQube. And the core things we wanted to make sure is that we said because we are the CICD team, we should be using our CICD platform when we're doing this development. We also thought we would take it even a step further, and we wanted to use the project management tools that are in GitLab that most people are used to using Jira and everything else, but I'm a kind of guy who likes to have everything in one place if I can. And in this case, GitLab has all the issue management and tracking that I need in here. And I know I could connect it to Jira if I want to, but I don't want to go back and forth. I like going just to one tool if I can. And then we also, other thing is we like using serverless, AWS serverless, so that's what we kind of stuck in this case, or we stuck with it in this case. And then we also said we want to be deploying all the time. Like, so I don't know if anyone's ever seen the movie Glengarry, Glen Ross, probably not, but Alec Baldwin in there says always be closing. It's a big sales speech. And so this we said we'll always be deploying, always be deploying. So this is kind of just really quickly how our process is as far as deployment. We have feature branches we work on. We deploy our feature branches manually to a development environment. So that's kind of where we can blow it up and do whatever we want. We don't really care. But once we get to where say we want to actually deploy it, we want to test this in our integration environment. And so what we're doing is we're basically, when someone submits a merge request, that's when we deploy it to the integration environment. And that's when we have a stable environment that we can really start doing some actual testing to see, is it okay to go? And then once that's done, we have code reviews and everything else in the merge requests. And then once that merge is done, once it's approved and merged, then we immediately push it out to production. So anything that's in production or anything that's in the master branch should be able to be on the production branch like now. And I think that's a pretty common theme now in a lot of DevOps stuff is, everything that you deploy, push to master should be out automatically. It should be out there right away. So I guess what I have next is I kind of wanted to show how we're using our pipelines inside of the CICD system. So, the formatting got messed up. Oh well. So what I'd like to do is show a little bit of code snippets of what we're doing for our platform that we have right now. So this is where it might slow down a little bit. So let's open up GitLab. Where'd it go? So we broke up our application into the pieces that made the most sense for us. We have a project that has all of our core infrastructure pieces as far as just data stores and buckets and everything else that we need for our projects to work with. The API, and then basically our two consumers, and then shared code that we have inside of here. So one of the things that we're doing a lot before too, like I mentioned, we try to do shared templates. And so what we're doing in Core at this point is we have the notion of shared templates in here. So if we go to a pipeline that's a little bit more complicated for the Core, we can see here, or this is the regular GitLab pipeline file. I don't know, is that too small or make it a little bit bigger? Is that okay? Yeah. Okay. So we have here again the same kind of change stages that we like custom stages that we have as well, that we want to define for what we want to run in our application or run in our pipeline. But we also are now including a file, and this is basically a included template file. And if you scroll down here, we can see that we're now extending jobs. So before we had the initial one where we had a simple test job. Now we're actually saying we're defining jobs that we can actually share across multiple different pipelines. And so all shared jobs are just other jobs. So they look, we go to a simple job here. We have where we're defining all of our different Amazon account information and everything else. And so now we can basically choose different jobs that say deploy to integration. We actually mix in our Amazon integration job inside of there. And we can mix in as many jobs as we want to. Of course, like YAML when you do merges tends to clobber stuff, but we basically have simple jobs that are set up that do tasks that can be shared across all different of our pipelines. And so we have things in here too, like validating our serverless application model templates. We have things that are used for the actual building of our serverless application functionality, along with deploying, and there's a whole bunch of ones that are in here. So if you now look at the code itself inside the actual template itself, it's really just a lot of extends. So deploy simple cloud formation, or deploy SSM parameters. So the idea is to kind of have these shared jobs across multiple different projects. So this is the core project, and if we go to the next project, which would be, let's look at let me go to our project here, our Sonar project, which is very confusing sometimes because Sonar is its own server, and now we're saying a Sonar project. We're not actually developing Sonar, we're just developing a consumer for Sonar. But so in here, we have, again, down here, we're validating SAM templates, SAM build, and so you can see we're starting to include these things this way. So we kind of have a common pattern of how we're actually doing things across the board. It's very easy to identify some of these things, especially when it's your own, when you have a very, it's all serverless. It's much easier to do this way because you have maybe less variance between your jobs. So of course, if you have something that's deploying to containerized endpoints or containerized deployments and mix of serverless and, then it gets a little bit more. But the goal is to kind of have these templates shareable for all of our other internal project teams. And then also too, one of the things that we're doing, if I go into our shared one here, we are looking at, we have upstream. So this is doesn't look like much. But it's the build pipeline for our shared components. We use Git submodules for some very simple code pieces because we found it simpler to use Git submodules than building layers and dealing with versioning of layers with multiple different projects that we're depending on it downstream. So what we have here is we have the shared component here. Whenever it gets an update, it basically kicks off downstream jobs for our Sonar and our Artifactory projects. And so what we do in those cases, if we look at this is what I wanted to show. So you have, like, this is the shared code. It's basically creating, it's just doing its testing against the code when it's on the master branch, and then it basically kicks off the other jobs from downstream and initiates them to do so they'll check out and test the newest code against the master branch. And then what we do is we have it we automatically create merge requests. So it'll create a new branch, open a merge request, and alert everyone on the team that you need to take a look at this because this code's been updated and you should go through, and we want to have our code be as updated as possible so that we can keep this process going the whole way through. And yeah, I could spend a little bit more time on going in the in-depth of this, but maybe we can talk a little bit. Someone can, if they want to, can talk afterwards a little bit more about this. So for us, we're still continuing to grow our platform at this point. We're looking at the possibility of updating to GitLab Ultimate. There's lots of tools, like I mentioned before. We can kind of have a lot of security testing tools. We get a lot better, or not a lot better, but we get more functionality for the project management tools that are inside of GitLab. There's just a lot of different pieces of functionality that we can get out of that we would like. We're in the process of moving all of our authentication to using Azure AD. Our core inside of MAN is based on Azure AD for authentication. But again, the edges are handling the authorization for what they have access to. So that gets to why we still have to have these synchronizing scripts I would like to have Azure AD do all of it, not have to do with it. But in this case, it necessitates us to still have these kind of scripts for who has roles and rights to each different platform. But we'll keep on working on making more and more sophisticated runners and containers for jobs, more tooling for testing and rollbacks of deployments. And then also we want to have more and more shared templating so we can onboard projects faster. We have a central location inside of our GitLab as well too. We try to use this as a way to document and everything else. And then I didn't show that, that's my bad. But our whole thing is we just want more and more and more and more. We want to really kind of have, not just for our team, because we have fun working with it, we want to have all the teams be able to have the fun that we're having too, of being able to have development, what's like fast feedback and everything else, the development process. And being able to get your products out the door so much faster as well too. So, and it works for us because we get to talk with all the other cool teams to see what they're doing as well. So with that, I guess I would open up, does anybody have any questions? And maybe I have some answers, maybe I don't have answers, maybe.
Hi.
Hi.
So how are you managing secrets?
Secrets? So with GitLab Pipeline, we don't really put any secrets inside of GitLab if we can. We have some instances where we have it. This goes back to the variables. The variables are encrypted inside the store inside of GitLab. But we try to actually inject the secrets as much into the environments themselves. So for example, having information for usernames and passwords or tokens or whatever else, if we're deploying to like an Amazon production system, then we try to use either secret manager or SSM stored parameters and have the runners know how to actually pull those out for deployment in those cases. So we try to have the environments, we try to have GitLab have as little of it as possible, because I don't want to have to be on the hook for managing people's passwords and stuff like that, or having to worry about having those kind of leaks. So the idea is to have it so you have it in your environment, and it knows how to, GitLab runners know how to pull that information out. So.
So you said that you created a set of templates, and that you make those templates available to your users. Mm-hmm. Can you measure or know how many people are using them? If they are, so how do you know that there are templates that nobody uses?
That's a good question.
If there are any bugs there, do they stop using it because of that, or do they report bugs? How do you indicate that?
So right now we don't. I haven't really looked at doing that yet. I have gone through and looked to see how people are using stuff, working with the different teams that we have internally. In some of the teams in Lisbon, we have a lot of back and forth and talk about how they're using the templates and everything else, but they're not using the shared ones yet. We could start going through the code and searching literally for where it says include the file. And so you could see, like, we could go through and scan through all the different source code and see whose pipelines are including which pipelines and whatnot. I do, our team does. So in theory, we could go through and look at all of those that way. So, and the API supports a lot of stuff to do that. So again, I touched on it briefly with the system hooks that are in GitLab, but GitLab, like SonarQube, like Artifactory, like all the other, the CICD tools, has a very large API that you can kind of do all kinds of things and cool queries against it or whatever else at that point too. So, but that's an interesting idea to go through to kind of have those metrics to see, how people are actually using it and saying, hey, maybe this isn't such a great template. Let's find out why. So,
do you have one account by GitLab or many?
We have we're hosting GitLab inside of an EC2 instance right now, and so we only have like one instance of GitLab. We have a production version, an integration one where our team blows it up all the time and tries new stuff out on the integration environment. But we have one production one with right now we have 250 users or maybe even more at this point that are on it, and we plan on migrating to about 500 next year. So we have multiple different accounts or multiple individual user accounts, but only like one GitLab instance.
And what is the volume of?
I'm sorry?
What is the present volume of?
Right now we have 250 users is what it is. So and some of those users are active and some of those users are not. I think that's like any of the other platforms. A lot of people want just to be able to go in and take a look and see what people are doing. And we have some very, very active developers on the platform too. So.
One small issue with templates sometimes is that if you have a centralized template in the repository, then you want to update, for example, a simple YAML, and you need to scrape everything, and just how do you plan to deal with that?
So you can do branching in your templating then too, and so again, but that doesn't necessarily solve all the problems for that. But that might even tie into what the other thing was before too, is to kind of have this to say, hey, who should I talk to? Who's using my template before I go through and then nuke like 3 jobs out of there, then everyone's like, oh my God, so it's also too like we're maybe one of the things to kind of do is to educate the teams to say like, we have some very stock standard things here, but the minute you want to do something completely crazy or custom or whatever else, then maybe that should be your team's responsibility to kind of maintain that too. And that's also the big thing of the enablement, right? It's also to get the teams to understand how it all works. So while you want quick onboarding for people, you also want those teams to grow and understand the tool so that they can kind of take it and grow and adapt the tool to their needs as well. So.
Do you version the templates, or does everybody use the templates for master?
So right now, my assumption is everyone's just using it for master because I haven't written my statistic thing yet. So I don't know how much is, but I think everyone's just using it for master right now. It probably would make a sense to maybe even get into tagging at some point too, to have like different version tags. So if I pick the tag of this one and I can make 300 changes to it, but I was using tag 1, 2, 3 for mine. I'm pretty sure, because I know you can pick by branch, I'm quite sure that you could probably do by a tag as well. So.
Yeah, you can, but I was wondering like, what's your experience with that?
We haven't had that many users yet, so because we're still onboarding a lot of people at this point, and so we're in the process of where we're getting a lot of kind of just showing people how to use the tool, and then to me right now, having them like the shared templates are very important, but I'm also kind of kicking the developers to do it themselves in some ways, or at least copy and paste, and then when they make those typos, they can learn after spending 4 hours what their typo mistake was, but they probably know a lot better after that then too. So.
That's good. Less technical question. How would you convince your team to use, what would be your first argument to use GitLab CI and CD? If they are used to, for example, using GitLab all the time, and they don't want to change the button, how would you convince them?
So I have probably a political answer to that, and I have a non-political answer. But the political answer would be, well, if you want support, then you want to kind of adapt to our platform. We say we're going to provide support for this, but we won't, and we can help you and dig in and do more like grow your team, teach your team how to use it, but we won't take necessarily, that's not our role right now. We don't do GitHub. We have teams that are still using Bitbucket and Stash as well too, and while those teams can remain on those platforms if they want to, our thing is to say, look, come to us because this is what we're doing. We're making it so that we're providing these shared templates. We're providing this assistance in how to break up your projects and how to make, really adapt a real CICD process for how you're doing stuff. So I will never say don't use what tool you're using, because you might have a very good reason for why you want to use that tool, and I don't know it. But I would also say let's talk about it and let's figure out where we're off. Like, what is it that we're missing? Maybe it's that we don't have a certain tool chain that you need, or a certain way that we're deploying, or maybe the way we do Amazon Cloud is wrong, or maybe you want to use Kubernetes too, or whatever else. Like, there's all these kind of different questions, but the big thing for me is to kind of just sit and talk with the people about it then too, because I'd like to hear what they're doing too. So.
So in one of your slides, you showed 3 stages in data plans: test, deploy, and then validate. In the validate part, which stuff do you usually look for? And in the validation, do you act upon it if something is
So we're kind of evolving this as well too. But again, I would say it kind of depends on what you're working on. So I try to kind of think of what is the simplest way of testing to make sure that the system is up alive. So I try to go to like root tools. I curl stuff. I do, or I use, like, if I'm using Amazon Lambdas directly, expecting for something that's based on streaming events, maybe it's easier just to invoke it. So it's really kind of depending upon what you're doing. I don't really have at this point, and I really couldn't suggest a perfect tool set to use for it. I know that we're looking at using, I'm trying to remember, there's behavioral-driven development tool for Python. It uses like Gherkin syntax, and so you can kind of set up your testing that way. But we're kind of playing around with it at this point. And then the next step is really, like you said, is the rollback, right? So you also have to figure out for your team, like do you want to keep on rolling forward? Or do you want to just kind of redeploy the old hash that actually, the old SHA that worked? So we're kind of also evolving with this as well too. I have a lot of ideas of how we want to do it. I've been testing some of these things then too, but I don't feel that they're really ready for prime time, that I feel comfortable with showing them, having people use them, because it also means that each of the teams themselves really has to understand, what does it truly mean that is my system working or not? And so I have a hard time right now telling people this should be the way you test your platform, because I don't necessarily know how your tool works or how you expect your system to work. So that's kind of why I go back to like using simple tools like curl, or whatever API calls you want to use or using CLI tools from different platforms.
Okay. Any rollbacks, like for instance, I deploy, you said in your git flow, the master is equal to production, right?
Yes.
You deploy to production, and you do a rollback to apply like a commit, so that the master branch is also in sync to production.
So that would be the thing, is you would want to actually revert to the last one. So we would create. So I have right now where I've had to create a couple different custom pipeline components so that it could create these branches, create the merge requests and everything else. So within these same containers, we would probably have a step that's literally just rollback. And then we would have to come up with an idea of, maybe we're not doing it yet, but I would like to think about like tagging, like, hey, everything passed, now let's tag this version at this point because it didn't blow up. And so of course that doesn't mean it's totally working, because internal stuff could break still too, but at least you have your pulse to make sure that it's not dead out there. So, and the idea would be is to roll it back to the latest, the old version, so then you're still master, still live. And then if you find fixes, you could revert and then slip in your other ones too. But again, that's depending upon how the team feels most comfortable working and setting up their.
One thing that I find challenging with as a DevOps platform team is to give them a self-sufficient part, but also with responsibility. And how do you come up with giving them the power to change the pipeline, but also keeping the rules, the company rules? For instance, you cannot disable SonarQube, you cannot disable tests. How do you do that?
So again, right now, because the process itself is in flux, we don't necessarily have that specific question yet, but that's in mind too, where the idea would be is you would have some kind of standardized pipeline that you would say, these are the kind of tools you have to use, and then you would create audits for those pipelines. It's very easy to go through every single project and like look to see like, hey, are they including this pipeline component inside of there? There's might be even better ways to go through and look at the jobs that ran, so you can actually use the API to go through and look at every single one of the pipelines that have run, and then verify that yes, they are running the SonarQube job or whatever else component that you want to have in that way, and then you could have an audit alert that would go off that. We're not there yet, but that would be something that you could probably set up in GitLab, because it has a lot of flexibility that it's API at this point. So.
In your experience, do people tend to follow it, or is it challenging for you daily teaching them how to do that, making them follow some rules?
Right now, it's like I said, because it's still early. It's a little bit easier because we don't have as many restrictions at this point. But I can see this being a little bit more challenging in the future. But I would like to think if we had these auditing tools in place, it would at least cover a part of the basis. And then the big thing is really about enablement and education. Like, so if someone wants to use the platform, you show them how they should use the platform, and not just like you should use it because of X, but like why you should use it because of X. And if they have questions about it, then let's talk about it and let them challenge you for it. If they think that what you're saying is malarkey, well, let's talk about why, and let's kind of go through it. So
we see tools and processes.
I'm sorry?
We see tools and processes here. And what is the target? What are the target and the users in production and organization of the main company? What is intended to be used?
What we have multiple different like endpoints that we're doing. We have tools that are being used for like sales pipelines and CRM solutions. And then we have, again, like I said, like we have logistics tools that are being created for. I guess I didn't say, I'm not sure. I think I didn't know this when I moved to Germany, that MAN was a trucking company, because they don't have them in America. It's all Mack trucks and whatever else. But so it was funny that I moved to Munich, and then, oh, there's this huge truck company in your backyard. Ah, okay, cool. I didn't know who that was before. But so they're doing a lot of like logistics packages now too. So they have things in those regards. They have a lot of like I said, a lot of embedded software development that I don't know a whole lot about. I'm not an engineering software developer by any means. So to me, there's a lot of cool stuff that's on there as well too. So.
Do you have load tests or stress tests integrated in any pipeline? And if not, is that the responsibility of the engineering team to integrate it, or is it your team responsible for integrating those tests?
Right now, we don't have anything set up for it, and in the responsibility, I would push this onto the developers, because my whole thing would be is to have the developers be the ones who are working on it, and they're responsible for it. But that doesn't mean that we wouldn't come in and like help out. Because when we go on and help a team, and we come up with a new stress testing tool that really works well for someone else, then we can kind of sell it to the whole firm. Or, the idea is that one of the cool things about GitLab that I think a lot of traditional enterprise companies do is they kind of shelter everyone from the code. Like, my code is in my silo. You cannot see my code. It's good and bad. Maybe you don't want to see my code, but the idea is to really share it. So we're really kind of, again, I didn't open this up before, but we have a group that's really just like CICD central, and we're basically creating like pipeline components that are shared, and not just like the pipeline templates, but actual pipeline Docker images that are being used. We're creating like examples and everything else. And so in the case if we had a load tester, the first thing I would be to do is to like make it public, so everyone, not internally public, so that everyone inside the company could have access to it. So.
How long does it take to integrate a new software developer, given that he doesn't know how to use GitLab pipelines?
If they're familiar with any other CI/CD system, then like a day at most, I think, just to get the basic idea of. I mean, if they're a software developer, it hurts me to think that someone wouldn't have an idea of how any of that would work. But if they've been a developer in the past 5 years, they should at least have some understanding of how CI/CD, in theory, should work. So to get them on board, it shouldn't be that hard. So. Thank you.